Hello and welcome to lesson 12 of English Chinese characters, ECC. Let's get to it. So the first character we're going to learn is the character for Ken. And this is how you draw it. The inside has a mouth, right? The next word we're going to learn is the word for may. And this is how you draw it. So this character has three radicals. One radical is repeated twice, so there's four parts. On the top left, that's a new radical, and it's the radical for cocoon. It's kind of shaped like a cocoon. And underneath that is the radical for flesh. Remember, flesh and moon, like the moon in the sky, they kind of look the same. And then on the right side, you have a spoon on top of a spoon. So you could think of like, may I eat that, right? May I eat that fleshy meat, or may I eat that insect, right? May. So the next character we're learning is the character for think, and this is how you draw it. So it also has three radicals. The part on the left is a tree radical. Maybe you sit under a tree and you like to be pensive by a tree. Nature does inspire that in us, right? Next to the tree is an I radical, right? So maybe when you're thinking, you have a very, thinky look to you. And then below both those is the radical for heart, because you think, with your heart, you use your heart when you're thinking. The next character we're learning is the character for drink, and this is how you draw it. So on the left side, there's a mouth radical, of course. And then on the right side, I think it kind of looks like a man holding or clasping a drink. So the top part, which is sort of like a sun, that part is kind of like a head, and then the two sort of like L-shaped, the bent, the bent strokes, those are kind of like arms, and you even have like a shoulder blade there too, right? That swoop on the left side, and then inside the arms, it's like his drink. He really wants that drink. Maybe it's a beer. Maybe that's me. So yeah, drink. The next character we're learning is the character for stand, and this is how you draw it. So this will probably represent both the verb to stand, and then also like maybe a stand, because in Chinese it's used for standing, like a person standing, and it's also the character for station. So this character is also going to represent this in station, right? Which makes sense because stand, station, it works for English. They're very similar, so it's going to represent both those. The part on the left is actually the radical for stand. And it kind of looks like a person standing. So you have that head, the stroke on the top is a head. Then you have like his, shoulders or chest, which is the line in the middle. And then you have two legs that are sort of trying to stand on maybe a tightrope, right? And I think historically that's what this picture does come from. It's a person standing, which I think is super cool. The next character we're learning is a character I've made up. So you noticed last lesson that I took the character for small and added it with the French, Latin, and Greek radical, because Chinese generally just uses the word small. Like, that's the word that they use. They use small for like a lot of things, whereas we wanted to distinguish it, right, with micro and mini, right? Well, the same thing sort of happens here. The Chinese used the character that we already learned for up. They use that to mean up, they use it to mean on, they use it to mean above, right? And those are so distinct in English, right? So because I really want to show that these things are all sort of the same in Chinese, I'm just slightly altering the characters to differentiate between up, on, and like above or over. So the first one we're learning is on, and you notice it's just the character for up, and there's just one line under it, right? And it kind of makes sense. It looks like something is on something, right? So this is not in Chinese, but it looks like their word for on. Their word for on would just not have that line underneath it. Their word for on is the same as their word for up, right? Great. So here's our first sentence. What does it say? Do you think I can drink that? Do you think I can drink that? Very good. And the next sentence? May I stand up on the book? May I stand up on the book? So that's a great example. You can see up and on next to each other. It should be pretty easy to differentiate between the two. And just one thing I want to mention is that if someone were like truly trying to decipher Chinese like very, very well and they had a really good basis of ECC, they would just need to know that like the concepts and words for can and may and able, like those are just not the same in Chinese. So I just want to tell you flat off, our words for can, our words for may, it's not a direct match. For example, they might use the word that we're assigning may to mean can, and like things like that. So it's not going to be perfect match, but you know, it gets the general idea across, right? If you want to know the specifics, you learn Chinese, right? Of course. Alright, great, but this is English. So the next character we're learning is the character for swim. So here's how you draw it. The radical on the left, of course, is the radical for water, and then the part on the right is essentially the character for water, like the character for water, not the radical, the character, but it just has an extra little on the top, right? So that means swim, which makes sense. This is an instance where there were two characters to represent swim in Chinese. It's a two-syllable word, but this one seemed to have most of the meaning, so I took it to mean swim. We didn't need to smush it, right? That's a very linguistic term. The smush. that's basically what we do. Okay, so the next character we're learning is the character for work. You don't have to work hard to write it. This is how you do it. 3 strokes, so great, work. And the next character we're learning is the character for run. So this is how you draw it. The part on the left is a radical for foot, which, I don't know, kind of makes sense. Like, it has a base and there's like these sort of like toes coming out of it. And then the part on the right, I don't know if someone would traditionally teach it this way, but because I see it, I'm going to teach it you this way. I'm going to say that there are 2 radicals there. The part on the top is a radical for wrap, right? That's, you know, sort of like 3-part encasement, like you're wrapping something around it. And then the thing that it's wrapping is the radical for self. So you can think of it like when you're running, you're wrapping your feet. Like you yourself are wrapping your feet, right? To run. In shoes, typically, right? So that's a good way to remember run. Here's your next sentence. Okay, so this was a little bit of a trick. I did introduce this to you before, but now we're really going to get into it. So remember, if we have a line, that L, in the left and top periphery, that's going to be past tense. So what does this say? She stood in the store. She stood in the store. Right? Here's our next sentence. It says, we ran and swam today. We ran and swam today. Very good. This is going to be our past tense marker, ed, right? Because that's sort of what it means in Chinese. And we touched on this a little bit before, right? This is how you draw it. Right, 2 strokes, so easy, ed. So we're not going to use this for all the past tense words, but we're going to use it for words that require a second syllable. So here, what does this say? Wanted. Wanted, right? What about this? What do you think this is? So this is could, right? We're taking the character for can, and we're putting the top and left periphery with an L shape. Could, right? I can, I could. I know these words aren't necessarily always the past, right? I could say, oh, I could go tomorrow, but I think that's okay, right? This is the next word we're learning. What is this? So we're taking the word may, and in the sort of past tense, might, right? I might have gone. I could have gone, right? We use it in the past. So might. What about this? So this is thought, right? Past tense. What about this? This is painted, right? Painted. What about this? What's this? This is drew. And my name is Drew, so I would actually use this character for my name. So this is my name. And what about this? What does this say? the inside says drink, and the periphery makes it drank. What about this? The inside is stand, with the periphery it becomes stood. What does this sentence say? He drank and she drank too. What about this? I thought you might go. I thought you might go. What about this? Ay, ay, ay. So this says, drew, drew, drew. And you might think that's nonsense, but it's a perfectly good sentence. I should know because I am Drew, and I drew myself. Or I drew another Drew, right? Drew, drew, drew. But you might think like, oh, this is kind of weak because if I saw this sentence in English, it would be so clear because you have the capitalization. It makes it very clear that it's a person you're talking about. It shows you that it's a proper noun. Well, there is a solution, and I mean, I think Chinese does this and a few different things. We're basically taking what they do, but it's this sort of squiggly underline. You see? I think they also sometimes use just an underline, but since we use that for our plural S, or the subject-verb agreement, we're not going to do that, of course. So we're using the squiggly. Personally, I don't really like it. I think it doesn't even match the system of characters. Like, all their other punctuation doesn't look like that. None of their characters have squiggly lines. I think it's a horrible idea. I think it makes it look like it's an error. Like, it looks like you're on Microsoft Word and there's like an error. So personally, I don't even really like it, but I think in the event that you really want to be specific, this is a tool we can use. Maybe I'll replace it, but that's what they would use sometimes. Okay, very good. True, true, true. Now we've come to the point in our lesson where I give you an actual Chinese sentence. Can you decipher it? So if I were reading this in ECC, I would read, she can may with me something swim. She can may with me something swim. So of course it means like, you know, she can swim with me, right? So again, the words for can and may, you're never going to find a perfect match. And they even mix them. So these two parts, they're sort of independent a lot of the time. They're separate from each other, I should say, not together. But then they can be together, right? The can and the may here in Chinese. And the sentence structure is obviously different. The word for swim, theirs has 2 syllables. But even in the other character, if you look at it, well, it has a water symbol in it, right? It has water. So yeah. And then the English translation, the English version looks like this. She can swim with me, right? I think that was a pretty simple lesson, but there's a lot of characters to learn. Practice them, and stay tuned for the quiz, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.